Hi there. Okay, first things first, just to be clear, if you're watching this video, there's two purposes that it might serve for you. One is that you added CompGov after the first day of full day teaching, and therefore you missed this lesson and you need a quick way to catch up. The other is you were there for that class, but you just want sort of reference material to get our definitions of the terms we talked about in that class straight, get them into your notebook or whatever. You are not, if you were there for this class and you participated fully, you are not required to watch this video, so you can save yourself 7 minutes or whatever it's going to be. That said, if you do need the review for whatever reason, I'm going to run through real quick some really basic terms in the study of comparative government that you're going to need to be able to use. So you might want to take some notes as you watch this video. First, just one logistical thing that we talked about in class is that very frequently I'm going to require you to do something in addition to just showing up and joining the Zoom or the Google Meet in order to get credit for being in class every day. And so I want to review that information so that once you jump into class, you are on board with all that stuff. In general, unless I tell you differently, the norms for participation, the requirements for earning participation points in this class, are that you make at least one substantive contribution per class session. So that means that generally when we're meeting in synchronous meetings, I'm going to ask you one or more actual questions about comparative government material. They might be review, they might be looking forward, they might be predictions, but this does not mean the warm-up stuff like, what did you do this weekend? That's not a substantive contribution, although I definitely want to hear what you did this weekend if it was more interesting than mine. It means you need to respond at least once to some kind of question about the actual course material that I'm asking you. And if you're unclear on whether a question I'm asking qualifies as that or not, feel free to just send me a private chat in synchronous meeting or email me after the fact. I've got a couple of examples here of what does and doesn't count as a substantive contribution. In general, you want to be adding some kind of information from your own head or from your own reading or from your own understanding or from your own research. Just saying, oh, I agree with what that person said doesn't count. But if you want to agree with what somebody else said and then add a reason or add an example or add an explanation, that counts as a substantive contribution. There's a bunch of different ways that you can do this. You can do this in text chat in Zoom or in Google Meet. You can do this on mic. I'll call, click the raise hand button. I'll call on you. You can actually say out loud using your mouth words the thing that you want to contribute. Or sometimes I'll give you something like a Padlet or a Jamboard or or Google Doc or some other collaboration tool. And substantive contributions there can also count towards your participation points. But that's just a reminder that when I ask questions, you need to be participating in that in order to earn full credit for doing the things you need to do in order to pass this class. Okay, during class, the first thing we talked about, time pending, I'll cut this if time is short, but the first thing we probably talked about was the point of comparing countries. Like, why are we studying AP comparative government as opposed to AP 6 countries? And I'm going to suggest 4 basic things. One is that we want to make some causal arguments. That's like what humans do when they try to explain stuff. And we need to be able to compare places where thing A happens in one place but not another place in order to make these arguments about cause and effect. A second is to try and develop some generalizations, right? Poorer countries are more susceptible to corruption than wealthier countries, or countries with oil actually tend to be less democratic than countries without oil, et cetera, et cetera. We need to compare a bunch of different cases in order to make those kinds of generalizations. A third thing is just that people who are educated in the United States tend to focus exclusively on the United States. That's just the way that our conversation works. We think we're great. And it's a general goal of mine to make sure that you come out of this class with a slightly more global mindset than you potentially came in with. And so I'm going to do my best in this class to actually not use the United States as an example, to make sure that we're drawing our examples primarily from the 6 case study countries in this class: Mexico, Nigeria, Iran, UK, China, Russia. And also from other countries outside of the United States. Even if your only interest ultimately in your life is, affecting American politics or acting in American politics, I still think it's valuable to get a bigger sense of the world. And so that's part of the reason why we're doing the comparative method in this class. Finally, like wherever you live, you should have the option in some way or another, whether it's by voting or by advocating or by staying informed, by talking with people. You should have the option to participate in politics in some way. And I think that comparing countries, getting that broader global view, is a really important way of informing our own participation in politics. I'm not going to do any explicit political advocacy. I'm not going to tell you how to vote, although I am going to tell you that you should vote if you can in general. But I'm gonna hope that the things that we do in this class help you inform your own participation in politics in Cambridge, in Massachusetts, in the United States, and wherever you might live after high school is over. There's a bunch of other reasons why it's probably also valuable to do comparative politics, but those are the four that really matter to me personally in teaching and constructing this class. Okay, so the content that I need you to take away from this class session, if you missed it, is basically two pairs of terms that are super important in just sounding like kind of a literate, educated person, particularly in the study of political science. And if you want to pause on these two "what's the difference" slides and try and figure it out before I tell you the answer, I encourage you to do that. I think I'll help you learn better. But if I look at these two pairs of statements, on the left, Mexico, Nigeria, and Russia have directly elected heads of state. China, Iran, and the UK don't. Nigeria is more democratic than China. And on the right, China's gross domestic product is more than 10 times that of Mexico. Second, the UK has the longest average life expectancy of the 6 countries. Those are, by the way, are referring to some data sheets that we looked at in class. They're accessible to you in the Unit 1 schedule if you want to take a look at them. So if I'm comparing these two sets of statements, the fundamental difference I should be able to identify is that on the left-hand side, what I'm looking at is called qualitative statements. Those are statements that are descriptive, but they don't rely on numbers. Whereas on the right-hand side, I'm looking at quantitative statements that are based on numerical data, things that I can count. Even though there aren't necessarily numbers in all of these statements, they rely on statements that can ultimately be measured in some sort of quantitative way. So the first pair of terms that you need to know in order to operate in this class is just the difference between qualitative data and quantitative data, essentially between words versus numbers. Sometimes there will be a little bit of fuzziness. Don't get super hung up on drawing a super bright line between these categories. But both types of data are relevant for this class, and I'm going to give you a fair amount of practice in working with both of those types of data. And the most basic distinction you need to make is just whether a piece of data is quantitative or qualitative. Second, take a look at these pairs of statements. On one side, Iran, Mexico, and Nigeria rely more on agriculture than the other countries. That's also in those data tables we looked at in class. And Nigeria has far more poor people than any of the other countries. Then on the other side, the UK is the best place to live of the 6 case study countries, and China and Iran don't seem to have much respect for democracy or human rights. The difference between these two pairs of statements is that on the left, what you see are empirical statements. They are fact-based. They are relatively objective. They can be demonstrated to be true or false. And you might argue what the best measure is of, how big a deal agriculture is, or how to measure poverty and where to draw the line between somebody who's poor and somebody who's not poor. But at the end of the day, those are ultimately largely objective questions that you can say these statements, these questions are true or they are false. On the other hand, on the right-hand side, what you have are what we refer to as normative statements. Those are value-based statements. They involve judgments, things like better or worse, good or bad. And the important thing that you need to know, and many of you are going to be disappointed to learn this, but you need to know it anyway, is that in AP CompGov, 95% of the time, we're dealing with empirical statements. This is not a class where I'm primarily going to create a space for you to just say which country you think is the best, for a couple of reasons. First, because I think it's a silly question to ask which country is the best country, obviously. Sealand. But second, because in order to inform your normative judgments, which are an important part of being an informed citizen of wherever you want to end up, you need to have a lot of empirical information. Right? We're not going to agree at the end of this class on all of the normative questions, but my hope is that I'm going to send you out of this class with a bunch more empirical information. And ultimately, I think you should make your normative judgments on the basis of a really large and deep body of empirical facts. So you're going to say some things in this class, or at least some of you are going to express some opinions in this class, which I'm not necessarily going to disagree with, but which I'm going to tell you, we're not going to talk about that for the next 25 minutes because that's a normative statement or because you're asking a normative question. That doesn't mean it's not important. That doesn't mean it's not valuable. That doesn't mean that whatever you're saying is a crucial part of becoming an informed citizen or an informed, thinker about the world. Just that what we're here for in this class is primarily empirical issues, and I think that's true of academics in the field of political science and comparative government as well. Very important that you be able to operate that distinction between empirical and normative questions. Okay, at the end of this class, I asked people to do everybody needs to do one thing. Other people, if you want, can do a second thing. The optional thing is that posted on the Unit 1 schedule, you will find a link to an optional practice quiz that just gives you some statements and asks you to identify whether they're empirical or normative, whether they're qualitative or quantitative. Then the other thing, which is required and which I do want you to make up if you join this class late, is to do what's called an exit ticket. That's also posted on Google Classroom. That's also linked in that Unit 1 schedule document, which is the first place you should go anytime you want to find anything for this class. And what I'm going to ask you to do in that exit ticket is to actually generate one of each of these four kinds of statements. So pick any topic, does not have to be political, doesn't have to be something that I know about, should be hopefully something that you're interested in, but it really doesn't matter what that topic is. And then just make four types of statement. Make an empirical statement about that topic, make a normative statement about that topic, make a quantitative statement about that topic, make a qualitative statement about that topic. If you join this class late and you need to make up that exit ticket, shoot me an email if you are unsure about sort of deadlines or how to best submit, or if you're not on Google Classroom. All that we can talk about one-on-one. But please do take care of that so that I know that you have the fundamental information which is necessary to make sense of basically everything else we do in the rest of this class. Thanks.